Okay, hey kids, what's up? It's day 47 of our social distancing. I have now forgotten all of your names, as well as the names of most of my uncles and aunts. I've read a couple of books. I've taught my dog a new trick, by which I mean my wife taught my dog a new trick. I am still here in my squeaky fart chair, and I'm here with my dog to make fun of my grammar, and we are going to look at a period 5 DBQ again. Now, I'm going to skip doing a period 6 DBQ review for the following reasons. Okay. In class, we did one super in depth. That was the imperialism one that we talked about with the Spanish American War. The first DBQs that you guys wrote were from the period 6 and early period 7, so you already have practice doing one. The College Board hasn't picked a good DBQ from period 5 in the last 10 years. In fact, the one that we're looking at today, I believe, was from 2007. Now, if you look at the questions they've asked in the last couple of years, there's a big blank in this area. I have a gut feeling that maybe period 5 is where the next DBQ is going to come from. However, I don't think every student is going to get the same DBQ. Like, logically, a good way to do test security is to have multiple DBQs. That way you guys all can't just jump on one Google Doc or something. So my gut instinct tells me that there's probably going to be 10, maybe even 15, 20 different DBQs from different eras. So while I think that we're due for a period 5 DBQ, there's no guarantee that it's going to be the same for everybody. Just something to think about. So with all that being said, go ahead and grab the documents down below. They're in the description. Let's go ahead and go through this. All right. The prompt. In what ways did African Americans shape the course and consequences of the Civil War? Confine your answers to the period 1861 to 1870. Okay, so what's important about this prompt is that it's not asking you about like slavery. Not like where did it come from, or even why was the Civil War originally fought. This prompt is telling you we know the Civil War changes while it is being fought. Why? Specifically, what effect did African Americans have on that? So, go ahead and make an outline of what you know about the Civil War itself and the status of Black Americans during that. And there's a hint. You're obviously going to start talking about slavery, but that's not what the whole essay is going to be about. Go ahead, pause the video for 3 minutes, outline your ideas. By the way, the original DBQ had 10 documents, so cutting it down to 5 was a little hard. Which also means that if you're from the future or you're some teacher that is using this or some student from another class, I understand the DBQ, the way I edited it, is not perfect. And I understand that the students that wrote the DBQ back in 2007 may have written something slightly differently because one, they had more time, but two, they had more documents. It's a long way of saying, I know, but I still think we came up with something close to what the College Board could ask. Anyway, sorry. Go ahead, pause the video. Okay, here's my outline. Here's what we got. Uh, we can start our paper about the status of slaves. Remember, the Civil War, Lincoln says over and over that the Civil War is not really about ending slavery, at least not for the North, not at the beginning. So the status of slaves is going to be a major thing. And as we know from the Dred Scott decision, slaves are considered property. And of course, the government can't take away that property. Then, as the war goes on, we have the Emancipation Proclamation, which quote unquote freed the slaves, leading to the 13th Amendment, which absolutely freed the slaves. Then we can talk about black soldiering with the Massachusetts 54th. We could talk about the Freedmen's Bureau. Then the question is going to be what happens to all of these now freed slaves? So we'll talk about the citizenship status, which of course is the 14th Amendment, and then the voting status in the 15th Amendment. And then like this kind of leads to, notice the time period that you're given. The essay doesn't stop when the Civil War is over. The essay should keep going a little bit. Maybe you're going to talk about Reconstruction, the radical Republicans, the impeachment of Johnson. Maybe you're going to talk about congressional reconstruction and sharecropping. Um, there's another component about Reconstruction that we can talk about, but I'm not going to say it in this video because I don't want it to get flagged. I think you can guess what I'm going to talk about or what I would imply. However, I'm intentionally not putting that in my sample essay or in this video because I don't want it to get flagged. It's 3 letters. You get it. Okay, now read the documents, add them to your chart. Go ahead and try this on your own for a minute or 2 or 5, and then I'll show you what I came up with. Go ahead. Okay, now you're back. Let's go through the documents. Now remember, we don't need to cover everything in the chart, but that's okay. Let's go through. Document 1, Major General Benjamin F. Butler. Butler. Maybe YouTube will flag me for that. Butler. Now, he's the Secretary of War. And remember, one of the initial problems that the American Army has is what happens with all these people that they're finding on these abandoned plantations. Remember, the Dred Scott decision says that slaves are property, not citizens. And since Lincoln kind of argues the South doesn't exist, the North can't take their property. So this is a great way to start your first body paragraph about this problem, because then you could tie it into the Emancipation Proclamation and the 13th Amendment. Bam, you have your 2 pieces of outside information already, and you have the historical context of Doc 1. Doc 1 is an underhand pitch. Hit it out of the park. Next, the Republican Party platform. Now, in class, we didn't talk about this. However, you should be able to look at the date, which is 1864, and then read this to figure out that the Republican Party is changing its beliefs because of the Civil War. This ties perfectly with the prompt. So, it says that there needs to be a constitutional amendment about slavery, the 13th Amendment. It also says that the black soldiers, the freedmen, are now, like, they're going to probably want to join the army, and they're going to get uh, um, full protection, full pay, just as the same as white people. So this is a good document to use as well. You could talk about multiple things with this document. Document 3. Now, this is a teacher in South Carolina. Basically, I am going to equate this to the Freedmen's Bureau, right? Talking about the fact that Black Americans need to be rehabilitated, but they also have a great desire to be rehabilitated. So that's going to change the consequences of this war. What are you going to do with this workforce that needs to be educated? Document 4 is a relatively common document from the College Board. I've seen this used multiple times. Question here. This could be tied to the 14th or 15th Amendments. This is perhaps Lady Liberty looking at a black veteran soldier that is injured, saying, why are we not giving protections and freedoms to this man who fought? So why not give citizenship to this man? Has he not earned it? You could also possibly tie this into like voting, because that can be considered a right of citizens, of course. Okay, document 5. We're going to look at the increase in black voting and also the increase in black participation in government governments in the South due to Reconstruction. So document 5 is really a Reconstruction document. You could tie it to the 15th Amendment, but it's also going to be tied with Reconstruction. So adding all this together, there is our new outline. You can see where things go. Lots of stuff in here. You'll notice that, I mean, maybe I should have moved document 5 down to be about Reconstruction, but again, we'll see as this goes. Okay, now because we have time, I want you guys to go ahead and pause the video and think of how you would structure this essay. What do you bring up in your intro? Construct a thesis. And really for this one, you might want to think of like a logical order. The documents on a DBQ are almost always in chronological order. So for an essay like this, where it's talking about the change of something over time, you're going to want to go in that order as well. So go ahead, pause the video, see what you guys come up with, and then I'll show you guys my outline. Welcome back. Here's what I came up with. So, my intro paragraph, I'm going to talk about how when the Civil War begins, it's not really about slavery. And then as the war progresses, the aims and goals of the war change to be about ending slavery. My thesis, it's not like an exact through 1, 2, 3 thesis, but it kind of is. So, through questions about the status of slaves during the war and what rights and freedoms freedmen would be given after the war, African Americans changed the course and consequences of the Civil War. You'll notice I specifically use the language course and consequences because that's in the prompt. So I'm saying that the fact that slaves were encountered by the Northern Army is going to change the course of the war, and then what happens with all these freed slaves is going to change the consequences of the war. Oh, I see now. Okay, body paragraph 1, going to talk about the status of slaves found by the North. We're going to talk about the Emancipation Proclamation, the 13th Amendment. Then we're going to talk about the Republican Party platform changing, showing during the middle of the war that the scope of this war changes. Then we're going to talk about the consequences of this war. We're going to talk about the rehabilitation of the freedmen. We're going to talk about the citizenship and voting rights status. And then in body paragraph 3, we're going to talk about the early successes of Reconstruction. And then, obviously, Reconstruction doesn't go so well, so I'm going to kind of bring that in. Okay, I want you guys to attempt to write your own essay. This is what you are doing for credit in my class right now. So go ahead and pause the video and give yourself 30 minutes. Not a lot of time, I know, but that's all you're going to have. You probably spent 15 minutes reading and outlining, and you're only going to have 30 to write. Go ahead, pause the video. I'll see you on the other side. Okay, hi, we're back. Let's review my sample. Now, I did write this in less than 30 minutes using that same outline from above. Again, as I always say, this essay is far from perfect, but I'm pretty sure that we're going to pass the AP exam with this sample essay. I feel relatively confident this time. But again, same caveat, I'm not an AP grader. I'm only kind of perfect. We're low on time. We're socially isolated. None of our brains work. I forgot how to teach, blah, 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 right? That being said, this probably still passes. Let's go through. And again, you guys have the essay so we can see how this works. When the Civil War broke out in 1861, it was not originally over ending slavery. President Lincoln reiterated multiple times that he was not going to end slavery and did not think he had the legal authority to do so anyway. Despite this, the Southern states began to secede as soon as his election to the presidency was announced, beginning the Civil War. As the Civil War progressed and continued to get bloodier and bloodier, and Northern soldiers began to see the degradation of slaves on Southern plantations, the purpose of the war changed. What originally began as a war to bring back the South into the Union became a fight over the equality of man. That's a damn good intro, Mullen. Jeez. Through questions about the status of slaves during the war and what rights and freedoms freedmen would be given after the war, African Americans changed the course and consequences of the Civil War. One of the points that you guys get on the DBQ is called historical contextualization, which means setting up the essay. This is a good setup of the essay. And the second point we're earning here is through the thesis itself answering the prompt, which it absolutely does. Now, let's bring in some outside information, use some documents, and keep adding up to that score. The North did not originally fight the Civil War to end slavery, but the question of slavery became an immediate concern for the North quickly after the war began. As the Northern Army began invading the South, they came upon Southern plantations that were full of slaves but abandoned by whites. Initially, soldiers did not know what to do with these people, as slaves were legally defined as property by the Dred Scott decision. Outside information. Quickly, the question as to the status of slavery and the goals of the war went to the forefront of American policymakers. That's me kind of using the historical context of document 1. As more plantations were conquered and more slaves were freed, Lincoln needed to make a policy change for the North. He issued his Emancipation Proclamation in 1863, which said that slaves in the South were free. With this proclamation, the goals of the war changed to be about the liberation of slaves. This eventually led to a change in the Republican Party platform, which adopted not only the emancipation of slaves, but a constitutional amendment affirming such, which the South could not change, and that the freedmen who entered the Army, such as the famous all-black Massachusetts 54th Regiment, should receive equal status and pay, document 2. So this is a really long sentence going through what document 2 is about. But you'll see with my next sentence, I'm kind of like, recontextualizing what this means. This, along with Lincoln's reelection and the 13th Amendment, which officially ended slavery in the U.S., showed how African Americans changed the course and meaning of the Civil War. So this is a really good body paragraph kind of saying that the Civil War started about something, then we see these African Americans as slaves, and then this changes what the Civil War is fought about, which is exactly what the prompt is asking us. Now, my second body paragraph, we're going to talk about what happens when the war is over. In 1865, the fighting on the battlefields ended, but the fight for black equality was only just beginning. With the South defeated on the battlefield, now the nation needed to repair itself back together. This effort began with the former slaves themselves, mainly their rehabilitation with the efforts of the Freedmen's Bureau. Because the slaves were treated so poorly, and because whites in the South were reluctant to accept blacks into society, more than education was needed to protect their rights. It became apparent that Reconstruction would not be easy. The first goals of the radical Republicans in Congress was to guarantee the rights of the freedmen. They did this by passing the 14th Amendment, which made black Americans citizens. Next, the government passed the 15th Amendment, which allowed black males the right to vote. The change in status of black Americans after the war changed the consequences of the war itself. Okay, so if this was not a timed essay, I'd spend a little bit more time fleshing this paragraph out. But timed essay, you gotta do what you gotta do. What I really like, and this is going to sound weird, my favorite part of this entire paragraph, though, is this last sentence, which is basically saying that the status of black Americans changed the consequences of the war. So the fact that slavery is over changed the consequences of what the war was even about to begin with, which again is what the prompt is asking. Now, my third body paragraph is going to kind of serve as a conclusion, but again, we don't really have time to write a solid conclusion on its own, but this one kind of fits the purpose. Early Reconstruction efforts proved successful, mainly due to the fact that the Northern Army had not yet left the South. Freedmen used their newly found freedom to both run for office in the South and vote in the South. This led to a drastic, if temporary, change in leadership in the American South. However, the whites in the South would soon begin a concentrated effort to regain their power and take back the rights of the freedmen. The freedoms and rights that the freedmen fought so hard for would soon be taken away, and the struggle for black equality would be a constant theme of the United States for the next 150 years, perhaps the biggest consequence of the Civil War. Again, this is kind of a conclusion, but I threw document 5 in here, and then I also said that uh, black Americans changed the consequences of the Civil War, leading all the way to the struggles that we're facing in America today. So this is a really good way of answering the prompt. And we're done. I hope that these are helpful for you. Remember, you are doing these to earn credit in the class. The AP exam is coming up. We're really only going to have time to review one more of these. We'll do a period 7 one next week, and then the week after that, you guys are taking AP exams. So we have a lot going on right now. Um, but that's okay. You guys are going to get through it. We did well. I'll see you guys next time. Say hi to my dog. Gidget, say hi. She's sleeping. She doesn't like you guys. She's sleeping. Stop annoying me. I'm trying to sleep. You dang kids, I swear. Okay, anyway, bye.